This is deceleration.news. We're talking about Brackenridge Park this week and the campaign, the city's efforts to remove over 105 trees and displace a long-established rookery of migratory birds. We're talking with prominent bird and tree defenders Alesia, Garlock, and Daniel Armstrong. These are excerpted from a live broadcast we did last week. The entire experience has been really pretty profound and inspiring. I will say that, and I've been reflecting on it a lot, especially as that an effort came under attack through the founder and main columnist of one of the local media outlets for the crime of tying a ribbon around a tree that actually isn't one of the 105 plus 20 trees that are slated to be destroyed under the parks plan. And it was a really a bizarre and kind of irate punching down example where, you know, I took this up the line, up the chain with them and sought five. I found at least five factual errors. They assented to one of them where they used the word girth and what they meant was diameter or something really like the most petty thing that we could win on. We won on, but the spirit of it was seemed so at odds with, you know, their own guiding principles under the Society of Professional Journalists of do no harm, right? Rather than challenging those in power and the fat cats and all that kind of stuff, this is actually on behalf of coming after and invisibilizing, in the worst sense, those who have been doing this organizing work. And it's, to me, inspiring as someone who retired after almost 5 years as a community organizer on clean energy, climate justice, environmental justice. These are not folks that I was familiar with, and many of them who hadn't organized before in their lives. That it's just something that very organically they looked around and they realized, you know, like that all of these trees that were going to be taken out and these birds that are under constant assault right now needed defenders, right? And so they stepped into that, and it's mostly women of color and largely an indigenous identifying women of color of this land and surrounding lands. And so I just applaud them to no end that there was very little time to respond. And they did, and they organized a movement, and they saved the trees, right? I mean, this is going to come back to us next year. There's going to be some public hearings now. The whole thing got slow rolled, and a big thanks to Councilmember Jalen McKee Rodriguez for really putting himself into that position with the city manager's office to slow track this, slow walk this. So that was a huge win, and I hope all of those of you who have been involved are celebrating that and celebrate that with one another in solidarity for the long work ahead. So now that is turned to protecting the birds, because that ongoing campaign to drive out a longstanding rookery of migratory birds continues, right? That's an area that we don't have leaders stepping in to defend, and so the people's movement continues and the people's work continues. And so I just really have a lot of respect for those who have engaged in this. I had a conversation with Alesia Garlock, who I met several years ago, I think prior to the work that happened at Elmendorf, for the mass eviction and destruction of the habitat there to drive out the birds of Elmendorf Lake on the west side of San Antonio, where some of my son's first experiences in a broader, more wild kind of nature took place. And it was so heartbreaking. It was very hard to go back, right, after the birds were gone. And so that work has shifted to Brackenridge, and Alesia has been there watching it all, documenting it all, grown adept with filing public information requests, legal requests for communications and documentation and research of the city and of these other federal agencies that have been, state and agencies that have been involved both. And so I just want to play this interview that we had together, and really appreciative. I saw her in the comments in the chat earlier, so it's possible if folks have questions while we're going, I'm trying to watch the threads. You can share this broadcast on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, I think on our LinkedIn too, and share comments there. But I'm watching the Facebook, I think, comments, and that seems to be where most of the audience is. So let me turn this back over to others, which is always a good practice, and introduce Alesia Garlock, a excellent wildlife photographer and growing wildlife environmental advocate. If you just maybe introduce yourself to folks who don't know you, aren't familiar with you and your work as an advocate and as a photographer, how you got involved in this issue.
Hi, my name's Alesia Garlock. I'm a wildlife environmental advocate. I have observed and documenting the nesting of migratory water birds, particularly at Brackenridge, but also throughout the city for the last 5 years. And I fight to protect them and their habitat as best I can, and to educate people, through telling of the story of the birds, where they come from, the hardships they face, during migration. Climate change will impact their future, and the biggest threat they face, which is the threat they're now facing, is destruction of their habitats by humans. And we've seen the destruction at Elmendorf, Woodlawn Lake Park, the casting pond. They scared them away from over there, and Brackenridge is next.
Now I know, so cattle egrets aren't a particular species at threat, but all bird species definitely are. A massive population declines over the last 50 years that have been charted, and all these other species that nest with them, right? I mean, this is not like the permit that the city has. Maybe you can speak to this. The permit that the city has allows for take of 4 different species, not just cattle egrets, and some of those are definitely under stress as well, right?
Right. Well, on that list was the great egret, which was once endangered, and that's supposed to be Audubon's bird, their symbol.
Their emblem, yeah.
The snowy egret, which is listed as a species of greatest conservation need in the state's wildlife action plan. The cormorant, and what was the other one?
There's a snowy great and cattle egret.
Cattle
and the
egret,
cormorant, right?
yeah, that's it. 4.
Yeah.
But we don't know that if it has been revised is the thing.
Okay.
I had requested a FOIA from the USDA and have not received anything to date. I requested one from the Fish and Wildlife Services, and because I mentioned that I had requested from the USDA, they declined to give me some from the Fish and Wildlife Service. So there seems to be an effort to withhold information from the public.
I know.
Parties.
Anytime I ask something from the city of San Antonio, I'm in for a 4-month wait generally. So,
right.
And I know you've experienced that locally and with the agencies as well.
It took them over a month to respond, and that's like, you have a state law or rule that says 10 days.
So now, right. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. So it's interesting. So right now, I mean, a couple of weeks back, the city's proposal to move forward quickly and cut down these trees before these birds migrated back to San Antonio. This rookery that's been in Brackenridge at the headwaters there for I'm not sure how many years, over a decade, I'm sure, and there's definitely the connection of wanting to make sure the trees come down, the birds come back, and they're forced to locate elsewhere, right? That project was put on pause, and I want to give you credit, and I want to give all the primarily women and women of color and indigenous identifying folks, tribal members, and others who got that stopped. These are not traditional environmental groups. It's not the environmental community. It's people of San Antonio. From my perspective, that's what I've seen, and they owe you a debt of gratitude. You didn't get that certainly from Bob Rivard in his column, but congratulations. The conversation is flipping now to the birds. What do you feel like people are missing in the conversation about, the trees are protected for now, and that's going to be, that vote will come back to, or not a vote, but that decision will come back to the community in the spring of next year, as I understand it, spring or summer of next year. But the birds are flying back. What should we be watching for and expecting as these birds return to Brackenridge?
Well, we would like to have observers in the park documenting what happens, because as of now, even the great egrets that usually start arriving in February have been harassed with the city parks banging 2x4s and the USDA what do you call it? Shooting off pyrotechnic explosives. They are shot out of what looks like a handgun. It's actually a blank pistol, and that those can actually kill. Blank pistols can kill people, but the explosive cartridge is listed as an exploding bomb.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want people to document what they see, because that's a record, and that shows that we can come back and say, look at what happened, and then we can looking forward, like, stop, we don't want this in our park. A city park is not meant to be a place for disturbance like this. To hear somebody banging 2x4s for an hour straight is very unsettling. It can raise your blood pressure, it can give you a headache, it can affect people negatively, and to allow that because you don't want some birds to nest is wrong. Parks are funded by the people of San Antonio, and they have failed to include us in these decisions that not only affect our wildlife and the environment, but the public as a whole.
And I know that for your activism, right, it looks like there's been a large increase in the police presence in the park. You've documented that and talked about that on social media. I believe that came about through requests from the Conservancy, and I saw some emails related to that. What has been your experience interacting with the police there today?
We actually haven't been there in a few days because we were out of town, but the thing is, when you have 5 police cars like sit there or sitting there, obviously meant to intimidate you, it is we feel threatened. We feel threatened for practicing our First Amendment right to free speech. We are there demonstrating to protect trees, birds, our sacred Yanawana Spirit River, and we are being threatened by a police presence that are obviously sent there to do just that. And it's wrong. Again, it's funded by who? We fund our city.
Now, there was go ahead.
To harass us, because you don't like us fighting to protect what is ours, our right to a cultural, religious, sacred area, and to enjoy nature and birds that migrate from hundreds or thousands of miles away. That's our right, and you're infringing on that right by intimidating us with these police that are there to do just that.
No, there was a complaint filed, right? I think there was. Maybe you can speak to that, and also, who are the different agencies that are involved? Maybe you can speak to Parks and Wildlife and USDA and explain who they are and what they do. But there was somebody said that they felt threatened because of the language one of the folks there used with them, or something like that. Is that right?
There were some people that were there at one point were from out of town. There were a lot of, it was on a weekend, I believe, and the park workers were being ridiculous, like banging the boards for an hour or two straight. And we understand that some of those out of towners may have yelled at them, but that wasn't our group. And but to be like put as a part of something we weren't, I think is wrong. You're not disclosing all the facts, but I believe they're going to do whatever they have to do, even if it's, how do you say, misrepresenting information to get us to leave. They're gonna tell their workers say this or say that. As we have seen this whole process, there's been a misrepresentation of facts, information that is being portrayed that is false by our city parks, and this design group. There's information that is being reported to the public that is not factual. And
what stands out for you? What do you track when you say people are not sharing factual information? I mean, I have I'll say, for instance, there was this column I mentioned from the founder of the San Antonio Report, now the Bob Rivard, 5 clear factual errors that under their own best journalistic practice and their own ethical guidelines they've adopted through the Society of Professional Journalism, they should correct, right? They have not made any corrections yet, and haven't responded to my email. But yeah, so
obviously,
what are people saying? So my question would be, like, what are people saying? What are people with the city saying, or elsewhere, that you feel like is causing misinformation or lack of understanding of what's really happening there that you're seeing with your own eyes?
Well, the one is that how Parks and Recreation always portrays or tries to say like the birds closed the playground, and he put in the recent article that the birds feet droppings caused the restrooms to be closed. The restrooms were never closed. I was there daily during nesting. The playground was closed at the start of the pandemic because of the pandemic, and it remained closed after we believe some of the birds did come to the back of the playground, chased away from, we believe, Elmendorf and who knows where else in the city. But so we had birds arrive into trees they never nested in before. So that's where you see, okay, something happened, some alteration or destruction to habit elsewhere, we know, which is Elmendorf, that pushed the birds. But to say that, place blame on them for closing the playground, no, they didn't close the playground. It was closed at the start of the pandemic and stayed closed after that, and I was there almost daily reporting what the birds were doing. And the things like they keep bringing up the Army Corps of Engineers, that they're working with the Army Corps of Engineers. And it really bothers me, and I let the Army Corps of Engineers know, because they said they were contacted, but they have not been consulted, and because there would be no this discharge to the river. So to me, the fact that the city keeps throwing them in there and they're not really involved is misrepresentation, facts. But if they are involved, hey, all the more better for us, because they follow the NEPA process. They will follow what they're supposed to follow.
Yeah, and likewise, it's interesting that I've heard both Public Works and Parks managers in these public meetings trying to get the trees permission to cut these trees out. They've talked about the Texas Historical Commission as well. Is it the commission? Anyway, I contacted the Historical Commission and was told that they didn't actually even attempt to file a permit for this work until the day before that planning commission meeting in January, and it was sent back as incomplete. I don't think they and as of like a week or so ago, when I was talking with the state, that they still didn't have a complete permit on file. So to say that they're being required to do certain things by the state, here's another example that I wish other members of the media would be looking at these kinds of statements, right?
Right. Now, I even had reached out also, and she said they had nothing. Everything was proposed. There was nothing like sent in. The floodplain management office, which falls under the FEMA, because we get federal funds for floodplain management. She said they didn't even have a permit before then. So how can you take out trees in a floodplain if you haven't even submitted a permit? A lot of misinformation. I think a lot of probably willful. I'm going to just say, I feel like it's information is being withheld from the public and for a purpose. This whole thing was like they tried to push it through without the public knowledge, public involvement at a rapid pace. And luckily we just caught on to it, and we're just trying to share what's going on, the facts of what we've collected via FOIA documents. Contact with the Texas Historic Commission, other entities, to make sure that the public has all the facts.
I haven't confirmed this myself, but I've had people sending me documents and asking questions and things, and one person said that they've been looking at a lot of archives, and I don't know if their backgrounds in academia or whatever, they're accessing some interesting archives on the history of the park and construction and development, and they said that the wall around these trees that they want to take the trees out to protect, they believe, or saw documents suggesting that wall was made to actually protect the trees, and not the other way around.
It's in the National Register of Historic Places. I think it's page 74. And it talks about that between 35 and 38, they built the wall around the trees to protect the trees.
That's
And
huge to
in this
me.
day and age, if you can build a pier in the ocean with the ocean around it, you
Mm-hmm.
can build a wall out to protect some
Mm-hmm.
trees.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a major thoroughfare,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
waterway. And there's a way they can build the wall out, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't want to.
Yeah.
And we know from the original um, findings that was in that HDRC packet, remove the trees to prevent rookeries from forming, that the
Mm-hmm.
birds have a lot to do with their plan
Yeah.
to demolition all those
Yeah,
trees.
it's kind of bizarre. You would think like if anybody understood that there's a plan to dismantle, evict, destroy, push out this rookery, and then you've got another plan that has the potential to remove the trees that are allowing the rookeries to stay. There wouldn't be a temptation of somebody in planning or in one of these departments to kind of, you know, advance one to serve the other. They've got two major projects that they're working on, and there's a lot of intersecting interests that would definitely add weight to or be a huge temptation to take out trees that don't need to go based upon the needs of the infrastructure of the park for sure.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, so we haven't talked about what have you been witnessing just in the last couple of weeks. I talked to Daniel about his experiences with the zoo. What have you seen happening on the park side? What have you documented elsewhere? And do you feel like that information is clear to folks?
Well, we are obviously seen the police presence, but also we, with the USDA shooting the explosives, she started in the park
Mm-hmm.
on the 18th, and then she moved into the zoo. Well, guess what you can see from the park? Everything that happens in the zoo trees.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have observed and documented is the destruction of nests, great egret nests in the zoo. Particularly, there were 10 that were laying on what they're considered incubating eggs when they're laying on the nest.
Mm-hmm.
So there were 10 nests. There were 44 total that were in progress. We went on the 22nd. We returned on the 25th. They had destroyed and removed the USDA.
Mm-hmm.
39 of those nests. 5 of them obviously had birds on them,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of adult birds are missing. So we suspect that they killed the adult birds. They have a permit, a depredation permit, but to me, that doesn't make it right.
Mm-hmm.
To know that they destroyed living embryos and adult birds because they don't like their poop, it doesn't make it right. And unfortunately, that's what's going to come into Brackenridge Park and every other city park unless the public gets involved and starts voicing their disgust, their opposition to this effort by our Parks and Recreation to
Mm-hmm.
have the USDA's wildlife services go into every park to destroy nests of viable eggs, kill birds if they have to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just the egrets and herons on their list. It's ducks, geese, vultures, deer, and all without public disclosure
Mm-hmm.
because that's wrong. I mean, what's a park without birds? What's a
Mm-hmm.
park without animals, anything, wildlife?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you chase one, you chase them all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everything's going.
Now, to pull apart a little bit what was seen and what was believed, and I think I've looked at videos that you've recorded, Daniel and others, and clearly there are branches of these trees that are gone where the nests used to be, right? So that's clear that we know that the nests were removed. Very strong evidence, I'll say. And the fact that the birds were laying on their nests suggests very strongly that there were viable there are eggs in those nests, right?
Right.
And you have photographed also what I've seen are eggshells at the base underneath these trees, bright blue eggshells that would suggest the herons, right?
Right.
Okay.
And so the other thing is we did find a partial carcass that was under
Okay.
a bush there in the zoo.
Okay.
But a lot of the other area where you would normally see like feathers or something was actually had fresh gravel or
Okay.
fresh
Oh,
granite. So
so it's
they're
new.
covering,
Okay.
yeah, they're
Okay.
covering their evidence, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
But as again, the zoo has a permit through the Fish and Wildlife Services for depredation, meaning to kill
Mm-hmm.
wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
we don't know if they would properly disclose what they do because,
right.
from my understanding, is they have an incinerator. So
Yeah, right. I think that is correct. And you used to have the Brackenridge Park. That's why people still take their cats and dogs to dump there because you used to have the ACS building with an incinerator there. I think that's correct, but some of this is older history.
Yeah.
So it would be really helpful, I would say, if parks and the zoo or those when these events happen to speak, with the public about, what clearly, I could see reasons for like not wanting a commingling of migratory birds with birds in enclosures or they may have threatened or endangered species. They're worried about zoonotic diseases, being carried from one. I can see it'd be a good conversation to have, but at this point, it's not. I will say I've reached out to the zoo and gotten canned press statements, but not any offering of a conversation. So I don't know if you've reached out and tried to ask them, why did you do this? What kind of response did you get?
Actually, there was a lady that had reached out on social media to them, and they told her that there had been no destroyed nests and no birds harmed. But again, we know there are a lot of adult birds that have disappeared unnaturally. I'd say it's unnaturally because the birds, if you the videos that we took, you could see them when they shoot the explosives, they go back into the trees. And then after Friday, Sunday for sure, there's no birds flying in the sky. They don't just disappear. It's unnatural. Especially if they were nesting or building nests, they go back. And these birds just disappeared.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the USDA, that is what they do. They kill wildlife. And we expect the same in Brackenridge Park when the others arrive.
And to be clear, Pinnell, is assistant manager at Parks and Recreation for the city of San Antonio, has said they're not doing lethal take, but you've documented cases previously, not in this case. Well, I don't even call it a separate case, but this month or last month, but was it last summer or when was it? But you've documented what certainly, I would say again, strong evidence of behaviors most likely by the parks employees that led to the destruction of nests and eggs. Is that right?
Right. So I was actually in 2020. There were night herons that were nesting in the playground, and the nests were 20, 30 feet up in the air. So your normal person could not reach it. But we watched those. I documented them for, I think, 1 or 2 weeks. So they were incubating embryos. And then came back after, I think they were closed for Easter or something. I forget. Oh, as 2020 was a pandemic, right? Anyway, so when we returned, they had destroyed the nest. But these nests were like, when a nest falls, it usually falls like it's like a basket. It'll fall like, if it's naturally, it just falls in one piece, and you'll see just. Yeah,
we should say you're a wildlife photographer. You've been documenting the birds of San Antonio for many, many years. You see the cycles of, go ahead.
Yeah, you can tell when a nest falls, it falls like usually intact until other birds will come start paying. But these were like they're destroyed. They were all to hell, and there were broken eggs everywhere. And these nests that were 20, 30 feet up in the air, somebody had to either use a lift or a pole. And the ordinary citizen would not be in the park with a lift or a pole. So that leaves Parks and Recreation or the USDA or both together. Somebody involved in that circle knows something that had to do with that. That's what we suspect. It had to be somebody that had access to the height. So those poor birds, the nests were destroyed. Those viable eggs were killed. And the sad part about they were yellow-crowned night herons is that they only live 6.3 years. Yeah. So.
Yeah, beautiful birds.
How cruel or what's the no compassion, lack of research, understanding that destroying nests of birds that only live 6.3 years it's going to impact them eventually. And why would you kill something anyway? Bill Pinnell says it's going to be non-lethal and humane. Well, they removed those baby cormorants at Elmendorf in 2019, and guess what? A lot of those birds died. So there has been
a few dozen, likely. I think, if I remember correctly, there was a Wildlife Rescue and Rehabilitation took in over 50 juvenile birds when they destroyed Bird Island's habitat, the rookery there. And what Wildlife Rescue told me at the time was that most of the birds they took in died.
Right, they died because they need their parent to take care of them. So you can't. Bill Pinnell cannot rightfully say that that no birds were killed because there were birds. And then same at Brackenridge, somebody in our city was involved in that destruction to those nests. And our Parks and Recreation are the ones who hired or initiated the hiring of the USDA Wildlife Services to come into our parks without public knowledge, without council approval. They bypass the city council. And guess what? The USDA kills wildlife, so we can expect them to be doing that in our parks in the birds arrive at first week of April. So we need the public to monitor, to document, to call and complain to their city council, call the news media. This needs to come out because it is wrong. It is wrong for our Parks and Recreation to think that hiring an agency that kills wildlife is acceptable in a city that we're supposed to be Bird City, Texas. We're supposed to be tree conservation, monarch champion.
And fought for a long time to be a no-kill shelter. Right? There'd been a long campaign for dogs and cats, right, along the same way. So I would imagine a large part of the public would want to be operate as a no-kill park system as well. So I did want to ask you if folks want to. So I will say that. So both Maria Bravo and Jalen McKee Rodriguez stepped in a good way on the tree issue and got that paused and put onto a slower channel of community meetings on behalf of these. It's 104 native trees, about 20 non-native or declining trees that are on that request. But nobody stepped in on the birds yet. Have you heard from either of their offices related to this?
No. I know it's a sensitive issue because, people are like, oh, we don't like the bird poop, but the bird poop disappears. The birds leave. They are migratory. They leave. And the fact that we have 4 at Brackenridge that need conservation, we should be looking at how can we help them? How can we help keep them from becoming threatened or endangered? Not, oh, we got to get them out. We don't care where they go. Destroy their nest, kill them if we have to, because we don't like their poop. And that's another misinformation thing that Danelle always says. Well, the birds, according to the Texas Texas State Historical Association, you can look up cattle egrets, and it says they have been found not to be or have diseases that are detrimental to humans or native herons or egrets. It's on their website. So that, misinformation that, they have diseases. We all have diseases. Dog poop has 2 million, a gram of dog poop has 2 million coliform bacteria, Humans, we have, bacteria also, but, let's share the fact.
Yeah, I would say, elephants do a lot of damage in their watering holes, right? I mean, I think what an amazing opportunity to have a living rookery in a city park. I mean, my advice and my recommendation to anybody who would listen to it is close that, move that playground equipment. You've got a big park there. Just pick it up, put it on another pad somewhere else. Invite the Witty and the zoo to come in and design interpretive signage to explain what a living rookery is and where these birds fly, just the same way you would in either one of those institutions. And let's be partners, global and trans-hemispheric partners, and allow to celebrate these birds when they come and wish them good bon voyage when they go and happy returns.
Well, part of Bird City, Texas, is the city is involved in World Migratory Bird Day, and I have worked with them they're in my last 3 books. And World Migratory Bird Day celebrates migratory birds that come between different, hemispheres, different countries. The furthest they come to San Antonio from is South America. Mexico, Central, and South America. And so we're sharing these birds with other countries, and people don't know that. And maybe they would understand better if they knew that the hardships that these birds face. They're facing destruction of habitat globally. We're in the 6th mass extinction of biodiversity because of actions by humans.
Yes.
We are destroying everything, and it needs to come to a point where we need to stop. Let's research. Let's reevaluate. Let's look at the bigger picture. How can we help these birds live so that they're here around 20, 30 years from now? Allowing the USDA to go around destroying nests with viable eggs and killing adults, that brings their numbers down. That affects their future because you've killed their offspring, and their offspring is what ensures they have a future.
Yep.
Unless we start taking care of what we have, including the trees, we need trees for oxygen, taking care of our wildlife, our city in a more compassionate, um, open-minded view, we're gonna go on a downward spiral. Our city air quality is now at moderate non-attainment. Take out more trees, and our air quality gets even worse. So we need the trees, but we also need to be compassionate to nature. Nature has as much right to be in a city park as we do, and it's time to look at it from a different view.
Cool.
Change your lens.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for your time, and thank you for all your work that you've been doing.
All right, thanks.
Okay, bye. Bye. So the reminder there, the call to action, the opportunity for volunteers is Friends of Migratory Birds in San Antonio on Facebook, Alesia Garlock, looking for witnesses, right? People to come into the park to, bring your phone, bring your camera, document what you see. Usually, and coming up into early April, we're going to see, the birds coming back in big numbers, and we need to make decisions, and we need to collectively have a conversation if we support this kind of violence against the species that we are here to share the land with. So anyway, a lot of gratitude and appreciation for Alesia, for everybody who's been involved with this. So there's a lot of comments on the chat. I was bringing them into the screen, trying to keep up with everything. There's a lot just dropped in there in the middle of our little plug, whatever you call it. But check out the comments. It looks like our Facebook page, facebook.com/deceleration. If you're finding this elsewhere, most of the comments are there. There's a lot of good information about some work coming up and how to engage. So before we bring in Daniel Armstrong for a conversation, we had trouble with our tech, and so we connected on Zoom, and then it's just a shot of him on his phone, and the audio could be better, but we're going to keep working at this. But I did obligatory disclaimer from the zoo. We talked about that earlier, saying no birds have been harmed or killed. It's being disputed by those who've been documenting on the ground. For sure. So let me move it over to Daniel Armstrong.
So I'm being kicked out of the zoo, right? You're making me leave. You're making me leave the zoo.
Where am I going?
Because I'm asking questions about what happened to the egrets who destroyed their nest. It's in violation of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. I would like a refund on my membership at the very least. I'm being thrown out of the zoo because I asked them why they're destroying nests in the tree.
I knew Alesia through being in the park, and I would spend a lot of time at the Whitty or in Brackenridge Park in Joski Pavilion, using it as my studio, working on things, or at the Whitty. And
like, describe your studio so that you're a local artist. What kind of
the world is my studio. I came up with that concept whenever I was just drawing random buildings and stuff, because I had a studio, like a ceramic studio, for a while, but it was like a big pain in the ass, and it was just a lot of equipment and stuff. And then once I moved out of there, I just put all that stuff in my mom's garage, and I just started like drawing out in the street. Or I was at the zoo, and then I did a commission doing some architecture, so I got into architecture. So I would just go anywhere in the city. I would just like bring my lawn chair and draw whatever I found interesting or whatever struck me. And so that's kind of how I ended up in the park. And that's how I met Alesia one day, because I was taking pictures I wanted to make an art piece about, this was, I don't know, a couple years ago, about the birds, because I would go and see all those birds and stuff. And it was like sad. And then, so I wanted to capture some of that, like reality.
So what do you mean
when you say,
when you say it was sad, what were you beginning to see when you were meeting with Alesia?
Well, so I just kind of like was interested in it, like that raw nature of it, like, and seeing all those like baby birds on the bottom, on the ground that had fallen out of their nest. And it was almost like seeing like a war photography, like Matthew Brady Civil War photos or something. And I met Alesia. She was like, "Hey, you're a tall man. Can you help me get this bird out of the gutter on the Brackenridge Park Conservancy?" So I helped her do that. And then she explained like why there are so many birds there, because they destroyed their habitat at Woodlawn Lake and stuff. And she'd explained that she'd been fighting that. And she gave me a book, one of her books, and I hit it off with her. I really liked her. And I learned about, I didn't really know like the individual birds that much. I liked animals a lot, but I wasn't into birds yet at that point. And I learned a lot from her and about the city, and she made me aware of like how their policies are. I already knew at the zoo from drawing at the zoo that, you know, a lot of the zookeepers just had this like really bad attitude. They did not like the birds. They, you know, didn't want to have to power wash their shit off the ground. And especially like even Tim Morrow, I never talked to him. Like he wouldn't talk to me. He was like above me. So, but I just always got the sense like he would always look pissed off when he was like walking through the area around the well and the bird cages. And he'd be like, you know, you could just get that definite vibe that, oh, it's like, this guy doesn't like the birds. And I would see him there all the time.
So when you got involved, so I'm just trying to understand, like historically, like a lot of people got involved in there in the park. There was a lot of organizing around to protect the trees, but you were already kind of rooted in understanding the concerns around the birds and having seen them kind of harassed and abused around the park. Is that right?
For sure. And and when they had the plan of cutting down the trees, it just seemed really obvious, like, oh wow, the zoo has their name written all over it. This is a plot to get rid of the birds, even though they're saying, oh, it's not about the birds. Bill Pinnell's saying it's not about the birds. The guys in the HGRC meeting with the city saying it's not about the birds, but like, that's a lie. It's completely about the birds. And they hate the birds and they want to see them gone. And we'll get to all the other stuff later.
Yeah, I think the way I've come to understand this project is you have definitely, there is an existing, since at least 2018-19 with Elmendorf Lake, an existing policy and developing campaigns
I mean,
to
for
move
me,
the birds outside of city parks. And then that's just become more apparent in Brackenridge. You know, this project with the trees and the restoration, that can stand on its own, but it's been tied around with this other campaign, documented in emails, documented in their own project description language. So it's really hard at this point to pull it apart, but they just don't want to talk about it.
Well, I mean, I would say going back to like 2013 when I started drawing at the zoo, like they did not want those birds there. And someone else sent me a link on Reddit or something about that the zoo had a kill permit as far as 2014 or something. I didn't know that till just the other day.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, I know the city's permit, I would not surprise me that the zoo would have one. I know that the city's permit allows lethal take of 4 different species. So,
but I also wonder if the zoo's permit is still good, and if they're using, I think it's critical to like think about if they're using the city's permit, because they're saying it's not about the birds, but if they're using the city's USDA permit to exterminate birds that are inside the zoo in trees that have jack shit to do with the bond project, then how can it not be about the birds? Like, come on.
Yeah. And that could be, I mean, we don't know at this point whether they very well may have and likely have their own, a separate permit. But yeah, unknown.
But it's also the same girl from the USDA is
exactly
killing
exactly
every night.
And so walk me through, and we'll replay some of your video that you shared with us, and you posted elsewhere about being escorted out of the zoo. But so you've been in, you said you had an annual pass when they were escorting you out.
Over and over.
And so they're escorting you out. What you asked somebody about the birds? You were a photographer.
I went up to we had been taking photos on 3 separate days because we wanted to document the nest, Alesia and I. So I think it was, I want to say Monday or Tuesday, and then Thursday, and then Saturday. And I think on Thursday, Alicia's got the better zoom lens, so she's got the better pictures. But I think it was on Thursday, we counted like 40 to 44 nests, and I think 10 of them had birds on it. But then when you zoom in on the pictures, there's like at least a couple dead birds that are just like, their necks are hanging over the side of the neck. Like, it's not a live bird. Like, it doesn't look alive. And then Saturday, when I went in there, I was just going to go take pictures, but I was super hyped up from the march. I don't know if you've seen that march video, but it was like really powerful and inspiring. And so I went in the zoo, and I was just like kind of shooting my mouth off, as I tend to do. And so there was like a couple girls at the front, and I was like, you know, I wonder what they know versus what the zookeepers know. And so I mentioned it to them, and maybe because they were like young, they're like, this creepy guy is like asking us questions. They told the security guards, or the security guard told me that they said that I was like videotaping them, which wasn't true. Like I had my camera there. I don't remember if I had the lens cap on it or not. But I was never videotaping them. And then so I went straight to the birds and I just took some pictures, and I was like disgusted because there was, I think, one bird nest in the tree. And I mean, I don't have such a good zoom lens, but when you zoom on it, it does look like a dead bird. So it was like just a horrible feeling that they'd exterminated all the birds, and I was pissed. So I just walked up to the zookeeper and I straight up asked her. I wasn't even videotaping at that point. I didn't start videotaping until security came. And I asked her, hey, what happened to the birds? And she told me something like, oh, all egrets are invasive. And I don't know if that's true, but as far as I know, it's cattle egrets are invasive. And I don't think great egrets are. Maybe they're not, but I still like the birds and I don't want to be exterminated inside the zoo. And then, so I was like, oh, okay. So then security started coming up. And so I was like, oh, well, what about these cranes? Because they have 3 cranes. They had one by the whooping crane, one by the carousel, and then one kind of over more by the cafe and the fence. And they're those blue genie cranes. I think they have one in the back in their like employee parking lot too. And because it's like, oh yeah, the birds didn't commit suicide and destroy their nest. Like they came in with those cranes. It was so obvious. And she said, oh, we're taking down the zoo lights. And I don't know. I didn't see any zoo lights. There might be.
Oh, so you're talking about mechanical cranes, not cranes, the birds. Okay,
oh yeah, I know. Sorry,
caught up with you.
Boom lifts. I need to call them boom lifts. I keep calling them cranes. And yeah, those blue genie boom lifts.
Yeah. And so at that point, they got yeah.
And I have a picture on my Instagram. I photographed because I thought they were going to start, because we were photographing them cutting down all the cypress trees. And then one day I got to the park and I just pulled my car in and I popped out my tripod and set it up as they had the crane up in the very top of the tree. And which now I'm thinking about, I know why I was in the top of the tree, because they didn't do anything. And I was confused by, oh, why aren't they didn't have like clippers or anything, or like chainsaws. They were just going up to the top of the tree to see if they could get there. So I snapped a photo of them. And then the girl I call Laser Girl, who works for the USDA, she got on her phone and called, Bill Pinnell. I know he was in the Brackenridge Park Conservancy. So I think she called him and they shut it down. They put the crane down and they drove it off, and I just followed him up to the parking lot, and me and Alesia took pictures of him, and I got in an argument with the security guard. I think it might have been the girl who threw me out of the zoo. And so I started screaming at her, and then I calmed down and walked away and stuff. And but I have that picture, and so I think they were just doing like an exercise in training, because maybe it's the first time they've taken all the nests down instead of just cutting down the trees.
So this is happening. I got confused. You were inside the zoo, but this is a separate incident you're just
This is a separate incident outside the zoo, right across the river from the bond project. Pretty much the area where we were protesting until we just got uncomfortable because cops are watching us 24/7 and just looking for me to say something or like speak loud and
So yeah, so let me just finish up this narrative. Within the zoo, they ask you to leave because you're taking photographs, you're asking questions of staff.
Right. Yeah, well, I was just asking about it, and she was like telling me lies, like, oh, they're for the zoo lights. And then when she said that, I said, oh, so what happened to all the birds in the nest? And she says, you'd have to ask the USDA about that. So she's basically acknowledging that.
Yeah.
They took down all, it's just like, oh, pointing her finger over there. And I think there was one more question after that. I don't know. There was something else she said. It's in the video. We can watch it. But yeah.
Cool. Okay. And so what's happened since then? Because it's been interesting that the conversation about the zoo kind of just popped up for a lot of people based upon this, your all observations. You're in the park watching the trees, monitoring the bird harassment. And you notice that it's happening on the other side of the fence too at the zoo. So all of a sudden the zoo kind of is pulled into the narrative.
I think they are the architects of this whole thing.
Okay. You think that the origin of trying to drive the birds out of Brackenridge begins with the zoo?
100%.
Okay. And that's based upon kind of conversations you've had with staff on both sides of the fence.
Man, I was friendly with the zookeepers. They used to let me in the conservation lab, and I would just be alone, and I would draw the horny toads all day. Like they would just leave me in there. Yeah, and I have other things to say about that too.
And so what would they say to you then?
I mean, I guess it was just, I can't think of anything specifically, but I would ask them about the birds because I was interested in them. And I would, sit out there and draw, and it was hot and it smelled like shit. And,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I don't want to exterminate the birds because of that. But I
Mm-hmm.
think at the end of the day, it's all about just selling more tickets because people will be
Mm-hmm.
turned off by some actual nature and
Mm-hmm.
native wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as the conservation there goes, I mean, just look at what they're doing inside the zoo. If they really cared about conservation, they wouldn't be doing it. It's just a fucking PR. It's good PR. Oh, look what
Mm-hmm.
we do.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see the data of all their like finances and stuff and how much actually goes to conservation.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, you hatch some horny toad eggs in a steel building, big deal. Like, and then you drive to Dallas. I don't know, maybe they do more, but as far as I know, they did that. And then they had blind salamanders, and they were taking blind salamanders from like the San Marcos River in Aquarina Springs, and they were putting them in like a fucking big metal or whatever, some kind of aquarium thing with a heater, and they were cannibalizing each other or they would just die. They're not going to mate. Like I just, maybe I'm not a blind salamander expert, but they live in a very specific environment, and they're a very highly evolved, adapted species to live in this environment. And I just can't imagine they're going to just, reproduce like crazy in an aquarium when they're already so rare. Come on.
Well, yeah, I think that's another area, and probably there's data available for folks who want that. I mean, there's one thing I think that the bird issue is like, definitely real. Their conservation work, I think, is also probably something that's quantifiable and measurable for folks who want to find out about that. But I'm wondering how your relationship with this project has changed based upon your experience with the zoo and being thrown out of the zoo.
Oh, being thrown. I mean, I was already kind of like not a fan of the zoo at that point. Like I really just started going to the witty. I'd rather draw the taxidermy than the animals, because like from the very beginning, like I wouldn't draw the mammals because like it just made me sad. Like I felt too much of a kinship with them, and I would draw the crocodiles. But even looking at the crocodiles now, like they have a gharial, and like I don't know what happened to it. I've never got to ask that question. Maybe they would have thrown me out of the zoo. But it's like they have a long snout. They're specialized for eating fish. I think they like merged off of other crocodiles in like the Jurassic. Like they're very different than all other crocodiles. And it's like half of its face is like sawed off. I've seen those. I remember when they were 3 feet long when I was a kid, and like half of that's its fucking sex appeal. Its mojo is that jar. It's a jar because that's the Indian word for jar, a jarial or whatever. And that really bummed me out the last time I went there. And it's like they've been in that same aquarium or whatever in the well, and it's like a big U-shaped thing of water. It's very narrow, like it's not deep. It's like 1.5 feet deep, and I don't know. It's just, I don't even remember where I was going with this. Sorry. What was the question?
That's okay. Well, yeah, I'm just wondering how your work, since being thrown out of the zoo and since observing the nests being cut out of the trees and, photographing, I know you photographed some of the eggshells there on the ground, that's some of the
dead birds in the nest.
Some of the best evidence that folks have seen. And you say there's other photos of dead birds, or? Yeah,
there's dead birds. And then there's also like all the photos are dated, and it's like, oh, there was this many nests on this day. And then there's no nests on Saturday or whatever day it was when they kicked me out.
So how do you talk to folks now when you're in Brackenridge Park, or when you're within that area?
Everywhere, dude. I did a Paul Revere style town crier bike rides for 6 hours or something the other day, and I'm just like, basically screaming like, San Antonio Zoo is killing our water birds. They're shooting them down out of the trees. That's what they're doing inside the zoo at night. And they're having the USDA do it. They're shooting them down in the birds, and they're telling everyone that they're relocating them. So, I mean, it's the more I get like invested in this issue, and the more I find out, like I just get more intense. Like in some ways, I feel like it's been really good for me because like I feel like so alive. Like my mind is racing. Like I go to bed, and that's the only time like my brain shuts the fuck up. And it is, I don't know, man. I'm very passionate about it, and I want to tell everyone that it is about the birds.
I know
and I'll take my time to explain it in detail to like anyone who's interested in listening to.
So if folks see you in the park, it's okay to stop you and say, hey, tell me what you know.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I have the sign, so that draws them in, stop and shop, and then
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
then people who are interested, and a lot of them are, man, like
Yeah.
overwhelmingly, like people don't want to see the trees get cut down and have
Right.
Jamal Moreno's butt ugly like Splashtown Sea. It looks like
Hmm.
SeaWorld to me, which is
Hmm.
also has Tim Morrow's fucking fingers all
Those
over it.
plaza drawings and everything.
Yeah, it looks like
Hmm.
SeaWorld, and Tim Morrow is the
Yeah.
former CEO of SeaWorld. He went from
Hmm.
there to the zoo.
Hmm. Yeah, you described kind of like the feeling of being engaging on this vocally and publicly,
Hmm.
the feeling that's given you of kind of like feeling and alive or in alignment. I think you said being alive. It reminds me a little bit of Diane Wilson down on the coast. I interviewed her years ago, 15 years ago maybe, and she talked about
uh,
the first time she locked herself down to
I don't know
a
who she is.
yeah,
I
she's
don't
an
really
activist
follow a
down
lot of
there,
stuff.
and she just said the first time
uh,
she locked herself to equipment down there is the
uh,
time that she felt like she was really she was doing the right thing, like she felt in
awesome.
alignment,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so
I
yeah, it's
totally
interesting.
identify with that.
Anyway, I just want to appreciate everybody who took the time to talk with me about any of this stuff, and for folks who came in to watch, to share comments, to learn from each other. That's what it's all about. I'm gonna do just fade out music and shut this down. Thanks everybody, and see you soon in the park, I'm sure.